Welcome to Affording Long-Term Care. We're going to be talking directly today about two things that might keep you awake at night: money and caring for yourselves or your loved ones long-term. Fortunately, today I am joined by three experts in our community who can help answer these questions and hopefully put your mind at ease. I'm joined by Kristen Lomeyer of Ally Legal Planning, John Dove of Edward Jones Investments, and Ellen Perticone of Senior Placement Navigators. Thank you all for joining us.
Sure.
So, Ellen, please introduce yourself and share a moment about what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Debbie. Hello, everyone. My name is Ellen Perticone, and I'm the owner of Senior Placement Navigators. That is a service that works with seniors and their families when they need to make a decision about and also follow through with a transition to senior living. What I do is I work with families and cover all aspects: the financial, the location, the health needs, and work with families through the transition and beyond to make sure it's smooth and it's the best fit for that senior.
Thanks, Ellen. Kristen, will you please share a little bit about you?
Yes, thank you, Debbie. My name is Kristen Lomeyer. I am an attorney barred in Maryland, and I am the co-founder of Ally Legal Planning with my wonderfully talented sister. And we are an estate planning law firm. So our priority is to make sure that we help individuals get their proper documentation in place to make sure that their wishes are followed in the event of incapacity or death.
Thanks, Kristen. And John, will you please share?
Sure. Good afternoon. John Dove. I am with Edward Jones Investments. My office is in Ellicott City. I am a financial advisor here at Edward Jones. And so we do everything from financial planning. We offer complimentary financial reviews to sit down and review what's going on with you, as well as we develop solutions, including long-term care as a solution, and help plan for retirement, set goals, and we use our established process to get you to where you need to be.
Excellent. Thank you all for those introductions. So today we're going to be talking about long-term care. I mean, there's so many topics we could cover, but this is one that weighs a lot on people's minds. And so we're going to be coming at this a few different angles, asking each of you to share what part you play in your professional role, and then we're going to be talking about some examples and answering questions. And so who would like to start in this? Ellen, I think you were going to start and get us kicked off here about this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So one of the things that I find is that families, when they're starting to deal with these issues, there is a whole field that has terminology that's different, standards that are different. And so I'll start with the term long-term care, because that is a big confusion. Sometimes long-term care is referred to skilled nursing only. Sometimes long-term care is referred to as skilled nursing and assisted living. And so it can be very confusing just using that term at all. So senior care, when I work with families, and really communication is very important, we distinguish which is assisted living and which is skilled nursing. They are different in many ways. Primarily medically, they are different. Pricing is different. The agenda is different. And so that is really the big thing there. With assisted living, the focus is on helping seniors to be as independent as they can and help with their activities of daily living. And it goes through bathing, grooming, toileting, eating, dressing, and mobility to enhance and help them along their journey. Assisted living is usually private pay. It is usually, it is mandated by the state and is overseen by a delegating nurse. On the other hand, skilled nursing is overseen by a medical doctor. It is for skilled nursing needs. Someone who needs a ventilator would be an example. Someone who needs skilled nursing needs a nurse on a regular basis. IVs, continual IVs, things like that. So there's a big distinction. So there's and in skilled nursing, would really be the last resort. The cost of that is usually between $9,000 and $12,000 a month, and that is private pay unless someone has long-term care insurance. And in addition to that, when those resources are exhausted, someone goes on Medicaid. Medicaid is a state and federal funding program. The other side, assisted living, before someone might need or may never need skilled nursing, assisted living is usually, most times, private pay. And there is a wide variety in what is available out in the marketplace. There are large corporate places, there are medium places, there's a lot of residential houses that have been converted, and they're usually less expensive, but that doesn't necessarily mean the care is not good. And so that is an area that needs a lot of navigation and a lot of help. So what a lot of people don't realize is that in assisted living, there are ways to help pay for this. And there's two main ways that I help people because they do lose sleep at night. One, it is a military benefit for veterans who have been during active duty in a wartime era. That's called aid in attendance. And there are standards and protocols, but that is one really good benefit for anyone who qualifies. Another benefit is by the state of Maryland, and it is a subsidy that is with smaller assisted livings who participate with it. And every county is a little bit different, but they all will work with these assisted livings and help literally subsidize the rent. So we look at that as well. There are income caps, there are asset caps. So even if a person doesn't qualify now, when I work with people, we look at the long-term plan and say, well, maybe in a year and a half, after you've spent down some of your savings, you could qualify for this particular benefit, and this house that you are considering participates. So that could be part of your plan. So those are some of the resources out there that a lot of people don't realize. And when I work with people, I walk them through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd like to mention, and my colleagues on this video are important to me. One of the first things I ask potential families when we talk on the phone is, who is the medical directive? Who is the financial power of attorney? Those are very important documents. And a lot of times I explain to people what they are and what they aren't. Sometimes there's confusion, and I know Kristen will go into that in more detail. But that is a fundamental piece. When moving somewhere, those need to be in order. And then, of course, any kind of long-term planning or understanding whether someone's working with a financial advisor for their resources. So my agenda is to help people as their advocate. And that goes to their finances as well, to have the best value, to preserve their assets, and give them the best care that they can have.
So thanks, Ellen. I think a lot of people, they come to you when they're in the moment. Most people don't sit and think, oh, I wonder what assisted living I'm going to want to go to when the time comes. Or I wonder this, so they come to you in the moment, and you can help guide them through. But if they come to people like Kristen and John before the crisis for the planning, that's really, then you can come from a position of more strength and more clarity and more calm before you find yourself in a place where you need assisted living or skilled nursing. Because that's the way I hope it works, you know. So John, you start meeting with people as soon as they want to start financially planning, and of course a lot of this for retirement, but it's also for this long-term care, because we don't know what is down in our future as far as our needs. So if you could jump in here and share a little bit about how you approach things, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's thank you, Ellen, too, for your perspective, because that's exactly right. Ellen helps navigate once you're in that. And she's a great resource for my clients, where people can go to her and help navigate that process. Whereas my role and Kristen's role obviously kind of comes more in planning. And so, we partner with our clients throughout their lives. And so you might start with the goal of, planning for retirement. I'm going to retire in 30 years. As you start to get closer to retirement, you start to think about different things, and life changes and goals change. And that's where you want to have a partner that you can work with and evaluate what's right for you. And I think I do want to kind of go a little bit more into some of the specifics about long-term care and what the choices are, but I also want to keep it high level because I don't want to put everybody to sleep today. So I do want to just start with saying that overall, roughly, there's two different ways of having long-term care. And this is the best way that I like to explain it. There's a life insurance with a long-term care rider. So the primary benefit is life insurance. And then there's a long-term care insurance with a death benefit. So it's almost like primary goal, life insurance, primary goal, long-term care. So I think that's important to first distinguish. And then from there, each one has its own attributes. It's what fits well with clients, different costs. And there's a lot of different things that go into it, from an elimination period. People will hear about that. People end up paying for this long-term care for all these years, and they never even knew that there was this thing called an elimination period, where if someone all of a sudden is stricken with a disease, they may have to wait 30, 60, 90 days before those benefits even kick in. Oh. And so I think it's important to understand what you're getting into when it comes to in regards to that. Another thing I was going to bring up is how, now you're in this position where you need this care. How does that care come to you? And there's two ways. There's a reimbursement, and there's what's called an indemnity. And the difference there is basically the indemnity will just send you a monthly check. Whatever benefit you have, they'll send you a monthly check. The reimbursement is exactly that, a reimbursement for those expenses. So I just bring this up because I think it's important when you go through and you are evaluating this with your financial advisor, whoever you're partnering with to do this, understand what choices you have available and be able to determine what fits well with you. A lot of my clients too may very well say, hey, I'll just pay for this down the road. I don't need to worry about it. I'm going to save my money and then I'll pay for it. And Ellen hit the nail on the head when she started to talk about the costs, where you may spend $12,000, $10,000 a month. You might be able to find some where it's $5,000 a month. But that's where your assets will then have to come into play when you evaluate and say, well, what can I afford? If you have some insurance there, that might help you step up where you can stay. You might have some additional benefits available to you, again, which is where Ellen comes in, helping navigate and partner to say, what can you afford? What's the best solution for you in regards to that? Last thing too, I'd say is, there's pricing that comes into play, but there's so many different aspects of it. That's not something I can give you like, hey, if you're 50, this is how much the pricing will be, as much as, hey, are you married? Do you smoke? Are you in good health conditions? And so many aspects come into it, but we are happy to help you navigate that. And feel free to reach out to me and I can get you a quote and give you a quote and say, hey, here's some options. Here's a life insurance with a long-term care rider. Here's a long-term care with a death benefit. Hope that helps as a starting point there, Debbie.
Absolutely. So you make your plans, you have your savings, you have your investments, you have your insurance, but then it comes time, and maybe, I don't know, Kristen will go into this a little bit, but comes time where one of you, if you're a couple, one may need, well, let's stay in the home, one needs care, and how does that work together when one needs the assets, and gets a little tricky. So Kristen, I'm glad you're here to help us with this.
That's definitely on the list. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I can say, regardless of at what point in time Ellen and John and I come in, we're all in the business of helping give the client peace of mind. So, you know, that's our job. And part of that is just giving information. So, you know, estate planning at the most basic level is trying to set up a system so that your estate, your assets, they're going to go where you want them to go after your death. But estate planning and long-term care planning, they're not mutually exclusive, and long-term care costs can sometimes significantly deplete somebody's estate. So it really is something that should be part of the process. And you know, with estate planning, I say you're never too old for estate planning. You know, if you're a minor child, you're too young. But, you know, there are certain things that, you know, it needs to be revisited all the time. And, you know, Ellen started out right out of the gate. The most basic thing that everybody needs is an advance directive and a power of attorney. And so that's like pre-planning at its very basic level. And it's important for multiple reasons. And I'd say the most obvious reason would be you want your wishes about your care to be made known to the person that's going to make those decisions for you in the event that you're disabled and can't do it. So an advance directive is sometimes called a living will, because you're not gone, but this is how you want your care managed. And it's really important because you want someone that you trust in that position. You want them to have the ability to access records, make decisions for you. But it also eliminates a need for a guardianship in court. So if you don't have these documents in place, an individual may petition the court, and then the law is going to decide in a pecking order who's most appropriately positioned to make your decisions, which may not be the person that you want to be making those decisions. So the other thing with the advance directive is that it allows your wishes with care to be made known. So I sometimes call this the pull the plug provisions, but if you reach an end of life stage and you don't want further care, you know, that is addressed in your advance directive, and that saves on additional costs and stress and strain for your family. And with the power of attorney, it's your financial power of attorney. So it allows individuals to sign contracts for you, pay your bills, you know, maintain what is happening while you're alive. So these things on their face may not be considered, you know, what someone would think of when they think of long-term care planning, but you are planning for the long term. And these are extremely important documents. So that's the basic level. And then when you think about somebody who is trying to decide at what stage in life they need to think long-term care, you know, it comes down to cost, right? So how do people pay for long-term care? There's the self-pay. So they're paying with their assets. There are things that you can do to spend your money. So as Ellen alluded, that Medicare has asset limits for being able to qualify to receive that help. So for an individual, in order to be able to receive Medicare, I think they can only have, if this is a married individual with one spouse who's applying, that individual can only have $2,500, and the spouse is allowed to retain approximately $1,000 in assets. So that's not a lot of money. And I think people have certain, there's certain thoughts that are initially, I guess, you know, it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. I need to spend down all of my money so that I can qualify. That's not what we want to do. And the biggest thing that I like to tell my clients is who are you trying to preserve your assets for and why? Sometimes you don't want to spend your assets down because your assets could purchase better care for you. If you're in a situation where you have adult children who are financially secure, who do not need your funds, maybe you do not need to go through the hoops in planning to preserve all of your assets. If you have a special needs child, maybe that's a different situation and you want to employ some of the methods that are available to preserve your assets. So I want people to think about that and not cut off their nose to spite their face just because they think they have to gift all their money away or hide their assets and spend everything down. It's really, really important to take a minute. And that's what the pre-planning is. And that's what we're here to talk with you about. So just from a Medicare standpoint, some of the things that people can do to preserve assets are to create trusts. What I always caution people, though, about the trust is that if you're creating an irrevocable trust, that means you're giving up control of that asset. So again, this isn't something that you should just knee-jerk do. Do you really need to give up control of your assets to a trustee? So that's something to think about. There are other things that can be done, including purchasing Medicare exempt annuities. There are other things that can be done, prepaying funeral expenses. So there are things that we can do in the pre-planning stage to help people navigate paying for long-term care without depleting their estate. And what I wanted to do was just kind of show by use of examples of a 65-year-old who might come to talk to me, and then an 80-year-old. You know, I'm going to throw out some scenarios and then ask John and Ellen to jump in as well. But so
Can I just clarify one thing? Because I think a lot of people make this huge mistake. Medicare and Medicaid are two very different things. Mm-hmm. Medicare is health insurance for people who are 65 and older, and they pay premiums on it. The government underwrites that. Medicaid aid is the financial aid that is when someone goes into skilled nursing and they deplete their resources and the government subsidizes it. So aid is the money part. So Medicaid is the financial supplement by the government, and that's Medicare is insurance. I know people get that confused easily, but if you think of aid as the financial aid, it might be easier to keep track of that. Sorry.
Right. No, that's fine. And I mean, I know that I do it too. Sometimes you pick the wrong, you say the wrong thing. And there's even different distinctions as you pare it down as to what the asset qualifications are for institutional Medicare, which is the nursing home, versus just regular.
Medicaid.
Yeah.
Medicaid.
I'm sorry, Medicaid. See, we got Medicaid. But so yeah, it pares down even more depending on the situation, whether you're single, what type of care you're using, whether you're married, whether both spouses are applying, or just one. So the other thing that's important is that there is in Maryland, there's a 5-year look back provision. So when an individual is applying for Medicare, 5 years.
Medicaid.
I'm going to keep doing it.
We got to get it right.
When an individual is applying for Medicaid, they will look at the previous 5 years from the date of that application. And if there are any transfers, so gifts or sales that were below fair market value, that's going to be, even though you think you've moved that asset out, it's still going to be counted when they're looking at your qualification. And there could be a penalty period associated with that. So, you know, some of these pre-planning aspects are very important because they need to be done a certain period of years in advance. I know that makes people uncomfortable sometimes because you don't know what's going on in the next 5 years or down the line, but it's important to have that conversation and think about. So
I have a question. Kristen, you said in Maryland it's 5 years. So that means other states may have different years. Medicaid is a state rule. Different states have different rules. So I'm just want to encourage people if they're watching it, most are. Okay.
California is like I think 2.5 years. I don't know all of them, but I think the majority of them are 5 years.
So just to say, if someone's watching this from a different state, you know, please check with your specific state's requirements. I just wanted to throw that in there.
That's a good point, because Medicaid is both state and federal combined, so it could be very different in many different states. And considering the look back, the Veterans Benefit Pension of Aid and Attendance for veterans, they do a 3-year look back. So they vary. So back to you, Kristen.
No problem. So what I wanted to do is just kind of bring forth an example of a 65-year-old man who has Alzheimer's in the family. So he comes in to have a conversation. He believes that he's going to have enough Social Security, pension, and retirement income to live on. but he has maybe multiple properties and he wants to decide, okay, what should I do? You know, in one instance, he can purchase long-term care insurance. And then another thing maybe he decides to do is set up an asset protection trust where he's going to transfer the properties and certain assets into this trust for the benefit of his children. Now, this is an irrevocable trust, so he can't change that during his lifetime, but suppose at age 70, Alzheimer's sets in, we're outside the 5-year period, so everything that was put into that trust is now not going to be a disqualifying asset for the purposes of Medicaid. And, you know, to the extent that he purchased insurance and that will cover the care, then we're in good shape. If there's additional funds that need to be paid over and above what the insurance does, depending on the rest of the asset situation, he may be able to qualify. So that's my example of a 65-year-old. Does anybody want to add anything?
I'll share something. Kristen, you brought something up that I think is a really important point. I also volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association, and one of the biggest indicators, or a big indicator, is that it runs in family lines. So you mentioned that other people in this person's family, whether it's siblings or parents or before that, that is a really good idea to have things put in place in the event. Because if someone has dementia, I have a situation right now where Granny is in a rehab, already been discharged. Her financial power of attorney passed away at 52, didn't expect it. There's no alternate. Nobody legally has financial power of attorney and can sign for this woman, and she can't sign for herself. It is a big dilemma because going to guardianship is expensive, time consuming, laborious, and it's a conundrum.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So John, what do you think
Yeah, I'll
about
jump in
Kristen's
too.
example?
Yeah, I'll jump in too and say, first of all, absolutely, Kristen too. Whenever clients come in, it is always important to say, hey, who's your power of attorney? Who's your financial power of attorney? Do you have your health directive? Do you have a will or a trust put in place? And if they don't, it's always good to have a resource that can help them get that accomplished. Just to use that example of a 65-year-old, I have a number here of a 60-year-old, but I want to give you guys just some numbers just to think about. And again, I want to also just clarify that this is there's all these conditions, you know, are you married? Are you a smoker? All these things play into it. So this is a hypothetical, okay? So it may not be exactly. So, but using like a 60-year-old male, so it's even different than Kristen's example, but still that's fine. When you think about this long-term care type of coverage, it comes down to is what you put in and then what you get out of it, right? So what you put in is your premium that you pay into it will then yield whatever you get out of it. So if you're very wealthy and you want to put in $500,000, you're going to get a lot of benefit down the road when you need it. If you're not able to put that amount in, then you won't get quite as much benefit, right? So I just want to use an example of, okay, if we were to take $100,000 and buy into a long-term care policy, how much benefit would you receive both from right away or say 20 years from now? So let's use a 60-year-old male as an example. $100,000 is what you buy into, what you pay into it. Basically what they say is from day one, your monthly benefit amount would be $3,300 a month. If instead you waited until you were 80, so you buy into it when you're 60, you're living a healthy life, and then you don't actually need it until you're 80 when something like Alzheimer's might set in more so, whatever it may be. That same $3,000 that you would have received on day one is now about $8,900. You know, so that's now what your benefit amount would be. I want to also put a stipulation there. It's also based on how long will that run out for, right? So $8,800 a month what this little thing is for is using a 7 years worth of care. So when you are looking to these things, you know, you may only want to cover yourself for 3 years. You may only want to cover yourself for 5 years or 7 years, whatever it might be. But, you know, if you put a lower number of years that you're going to be covering yourself, you'd get a higher amount on a monthly basis, right? So it's a lot of change this, and then you'll get a different number and find what fits you for that. But using that same example, one final thing, that 8,800 over 7 years would ultimately have about $860,000 worth of care. So a 60-year-old putting in 100 grand, you'd have about $860,000 worth of care to utilize over the course of 7 years. So again, there's a lot of details that change and can be tweaked, but that's where you want to find what fits you and what makes sense for you.
Yeah, and for situations like this, I mean, the most that we can do is speak in generalities, because everybody's situation is different, and something may work for one person that wouldn't work for another, and they may have different goals. So that's why it's so important to have, you know, your trusted advisors there to make sure everybody's on the same page and really get the client where they need to be for their specific situation.
I agree with Kristen, because really it's a matter of peace of mind for the family, and different people have different risk tolerance. And I'll give you an example that I'm working with now. Now, the average, if you're going to look at statistics and say, well, how long will I need this for, and what's this, and how can I do this? The average that a person is in an assisted living is 3 years. I would never use that statistic to work with my clients. And here's why. It depends on their age. It depends on their conditions. It depends on support from family. It depends on a lot of things. And really none of us know. I am working with a family right now who called me because they took someone else's advice who told them, oh, 3 years, that's what you'll need. The fellow went into an expensive place for 3 years, and now he's out of money. And they're calling me. And I said, how did this come to pass? And when she explained that, I said, okay, that is a true statistic, but I would never, ever, I couldn't say that. Depends like on many things. So, you know, that, I don't know how responsible that was to share, to use that statistic when spending someone's money, because someone could easily live way longer. So that, you know, that risk tolerance is a piece of this, and understanding the different options.
John, we have a question. Brian's asked a question. Was your example of $100,000 a one-time investment, or is that something that's yearly?
Yeah, that's a one-time investment, and you can either do it monthly, or you can even do it over 1 year, or you can even they offer multi-year payments. So you can set up a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, whatever you want to do to pay off that $100,000. So if you did a 10-year, that would mean that you'd be paying $10,000 a year over the course of 10 years. But obviously, when you change those things, it changes the numbers, it changes the outputs. So again, you guys are hitting the nail on the head of like, there's a big generality, and I wanted to be able to come to us and talk about some type of example and give us some actual hard numbers, but it is really difficult because you can't generalize it. And like a female at that same age receives less on a monthly basis. And you're like, why is that? Well, they live longer. And it just doesn't, but it's such a convoluted,
so the payouts based on the statistics as well as.
Exactly. They have all sorts of algorithms that, you know, it's an insurance company. And so I think we still have to appreciate the fact that it's an insurance thing, and they're running algorithms to determine what best fits them.
Of course. So Kristen, you had another example for us, an 80-year-old, and then what are some of the details about your 80-year-old?
So my 80-year-old parent, their husband and wife, they've done no pre-planning. So no long-term care insurance. We haven't set anything up. And let's say that the husband is now disabled and needs care, and the 80-year-old wife can't do it for him. And let's say that they each have a $400,000 IRA and they have a home that they are living in. If the husband wants to get Medicaid, what has to happen with these IRAs is that he would have to distribute his IRA basically down to nothing. And the wife would have to distribute her IRA down to that maximum allowable amount, which is $130,000. In which case we're now causing taxable events to happen here when they would have just taken their required minimum distributions. And now we're using the results of that tax money to pay for care until that is gone. And then we're going for Medicaid. So, you know, that's a situation where we haven't done any pre-planning and we have to just, you know, react. And what I will say though, is that there are still things that can be done for those 80-year-olds in that situation. There are individuals who are much smarter than me who specialize in preserving assets at that stage. And, you know, I don't do that. I know those people, so I'm always happy to refer out, you know, contact me. I will get you where you need to go. But that is an alternate scenario where you can really see what happens if there's no forethought.
That's a really powerful picture, because we've always said, a lot of people don't want to look at the future. They don't want to think about what might happen, but then things happen and you're in a difficult situation. Mm-hmm. John, when would you encourage people to start coming to visit you? A lot of people think to come see a financial advisor, I need to have a lot of assets, or else they want to come to you only after they've made a lot of money or been very, you know, but what might be a different way to look at that?
Yeah, I think if you're open to guidance and you're open to wanting to build a future, I think that's the most important thing. You know, we're here to help and offer advice and offer guidance, and you know, a lot of us wouldn't be where we were if someone else didn't help us. So I think it's important to, you know, it's not about having a certain number of assets, not about a certain amount of dollars or anything like that. It's about being receptive and wanting to save for a goal, save for retirement, and take action and take the steps that you need to do that. As I said before too, about this type of planning, it's important to evaluate, you know, we keep coming back to it, but it's important to evaluate the full picture and see what makes sense. You know, do you have kids? Is there kids involved? Is there no kids? You know, just like Kristen's saying, what type of legacy do you need? You know, maybe your kids are very well off and you don't need to do that. So what's the point? You know, what's the purpose? Mm-hmm. I think that's really the important aspect of this whole thing too, is just helping you evaluate what's the purpose? Why am I doing this? Why do I need to do this? And a lot of times, couples might come in, married couples who, you know, they do want to protect themselves, because we need to protect ourselves, because I need to protect my wife or my husband also, and make sure, because if something were to happen to me, I want to make sure that they are taken care of. I think from a age perspective, because this topic is long-term care, I would say, you know, you can be as young as 30 or as old as 70, 75, and it still makes sense. I think if you're younger than that or older than that, it might not make as much sense. And even when you're reaching age 70, you know, it may not make sense. You have to evaluate what makes sense for you. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. And you need to have a sounding board to discuss those things. And that's where I can come in and help you. And I think I love the idea of talking to Ellen ahead of time, but you're absolutely right. I don't think a lot of people are thinking, hey, let me talk to Ellen and see what assisted living I want to get into.
Let me
But at
see
the
what's
same
out there.
time,
Yeah.
but you may plan, and it probably wouldn't hurt to call Ellen and say, what do these things cost? What's the cost of living in this place? And
probably, yeah. John, that is, no matter who I talk to, what level we're talking about, there's always sticker shock. Always.
Absolutely.
And so I don't start working with families and say, what's your budget? We don't have a budget for this. What do you mean budget? What budget? Mm-hmm. So they, of course, want the best value for their money. And then I take it backwards and say, well, let's see what we're working with. Let's see, what do we have a wife, a husband, and she has to live somewhere. And what are we doing here? And back it out. Because people, they don't have perspective. And so I will show them, this is what X will get you. This is what X will get you. And it's like, it's like, one analogy would be buying a car. Okay. If you have the money for a Honda Accord, you are not going to the Rolls-Royce dealership. Okay. Or you're not going to the Jaguar dealership. So that's a piece of all of our decisions in life. And I'm happy to help people understand or get a handle on what the value is. I had a family who said, oh yeah, we have long-term care insurance. And then they looked it up and they said, oh my gosh, we only have $100 a day. I said, that's great. That's $3,000 a month. That might not cover everything, but that goes a long way. So that's a good thing.
Yep, it's good. Yeah, it's good to know. It's good to know. Make sure your perspective is actually kind of accurate.
And I help people with their perspective, because I don't set the rates, but I will show them the best values that are in the market.
And Kristen, I want to ask you, who needs a will, an advance directive, and a financial power of attorney? Do we just wait till we're 55 or 60, or do you advise something different?
How much risk do you like?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not a minor child, you should have the basics, and there are very affordable options to get the basics in place. I mean, as I said, advance directives and powers of attorney, you need that because you don't want to be in a situation where an emergency has happened, the worst has happened, and there's no one there to make the decisions for you. And you have your sibling who maybe you're estranged from making the decisions because the law says that's who's going to do it. And the reason why the will is important is that, it just, again, you're choosing the individual you trust to make sure that your affairs are handled the way you want to. And it cuts down on disputes. I call it a gift for your family that you're leaving behind, because it makes it easy. It makes it streamlined. A lot of this work, we do all of our estate planning work on flat fee basis. So there's really no reason that people shouldn't be able to have it in place. It's insurance that you're paying a one-time premium for. Everybody pays monthly premiums for health insurance. They pay car insurance. You may never use it. You're going to pass away at some point. You will use these documents. You're paying the premium one time. And it's just, a lot of people don't know what they don't know. John, I had somebody call the other day, and 65 years old, and asked if they needed long-term care insurance because they're healthy. But he had no idea that there was a death benefit at the end of it, which made it more palatable. He's like, okay, well, I'll be leaving something now to my daughter if I choose to do this. So I think people just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. And that's what we're here to try to help people know more. So
I'd just like to share something along with what Kristen said in what I think a lot of people don't realize. A healthcare directive does more than say pull the plug or don't pull the plug. You can be as detailed as you want. If you're a cat lover and you want 6 cats on your bed, by God, you put that into your healthcare directive, and then your wishes are known. And then the person who is your agent, if it can be possible, they will know what you want and make every effort to grant your wishes. It's not a guarantee, but at least they know. It's not like they have to guess what you would want. And that's really the gift. That's part of the gift. The other thing is, when people get very nervous about financial power of attorney, that doesn't mean you're giving your right away. That means you're allowing someone else in addition to you, as long as you're capable, to speak on your behalf, to sign on your behalf and make decisions. So it really does need to be someone you trust, but it doesn't take away you're right. And little things like that, a lot of people think they understand and they're a little off. So it makes a difference. Then they get more clarity.
Great points, Ellen. Brian, do you have any more questions for this lovely group of folks here?
Yeah.
So there are some things that I definitely need to probably at least pull out of the closet or wherever they are and say, what do we have? I know we have a will, but I don't know what's in it.
But Brian, I mean, you bring up a good point, because circumstances change, life happens. It's a good idea to just, every 2 years or so, just review what you have in place. Some of your agents may have passed away. Maybe now you want your adult children to be the people in those positions. So, I mean, for anyone, someone might need insurance now, they don't need it later. That's why most of us are available to speak with you, to help you as things change. So people should always keep that in mind, just continual revisiting of what you might need.
And a question for you, Kristen. That's a pretty simple update, right? If someone were to come to you with a will or a trust or something in place, you can review it and then update that.
I mean, we offer free consultations to everybody who calls, and that includes usually review of what's in place, because we just need to see what you have. Certain laws have changed, so there's certain things that need to be updated, but for the most part, people sometimes they just need one change. One agent needs to change, otherwise the rest of it's okay. So it's just
question on that. So does it matter who, I don't even know what the right term is, where the will was filed, or who it's filed with, or who the firm was that you opened it with, or I don't even know if those are the right terms, but
anyone can draft it. Yep.
So it doesn't matter if we don't have to go back to the original.
No, you don't have to. And most of that too, if you move states, you'll want to go to somebody certainly in the new state, because laws are not the same. But anybody, say you drafted it in Maryland with a firm in Baltimore, you can go to almost any firm in Maryland, and the laws are pretty much the same. It's not going to matter. It's just, sometimes it's a super quick change. Other times it depends. If you had a will drafted in 1980, things have changed. You probably need a new set of documents. But if it was 2 years ago, no, you probably don't need to go through everything, and it'll just be a quick fix.
One thing that might be helpful for you to know, Brian, is that you want to, in this area of what we're discussing, planning, you want to stay with an elder law attorney or an estate planning attorney. That's like Kristen's specialty, and she's going to know way more about that than someone who practices real estate law.
Right, it's a good point, Ellen. So, well, I just thank you all for coming together today it's this recording, so hopefully others will watch, but sharing all this information, and really peace of mind is what we talked about at the beginning, trying to bring some peace of mind and not lay awake at night worried about long-term care and how we're going to take care of it. So just thank you all. Brian, thank you for joining us. And all the contact information for Ellen, John, and Kristen is right with this recording on this page. So take care, and thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Thanks.